The photographs of Astley Castle taken in 2006, at the time of the architectural competition for its renewal, show a ruin on its way to becoming a mere remnant. The Landmark Trust, a charity organisation that protects and restores significant British buildings with the aim of providing short-term holiday lets, had a long-standing interest in Astley Castle, but had been unable to solve the conundrum of its restoration. It was in such bad shape that English Heritage, the British government's statutory advisor on the historic environment, listed it on its Heritage at Risk register. There is a sense that Landmark Trust's architectural competition was a last-ditch attempt to revitalise the ailing structure, the earliest parts of which date back to the 12th century. It is to their immense credit that they seized the challenge and invited 12 architectural firms to submit a scheme. The winning scheme was that of architects Witherford Watson Mann, and we are pleased to be able to talk to William Mann, who will reveal something of the process of this remarkable award-winning project. So my first question to you is, so what did you make of the brief from the Landmark Trust?
Well, I suppose it was quite a concise brief. I mean, sometimes you get huge piles of paper, sometimes, it's sort of one A4. This was a couple of sides, and it was kind of clear and crisp. They asked this question. They asked the big question, which is, how can a contemporary building cohabit with one that is old and remarkable? And they didn't prescribe how to do it, where to do it. So there were actually, I think, 12 architects who competed for the job, and they got a wide range of responses. I think they indicated a preference for 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and that was kind of it. But there was, it's a huge site and a huge building, so the castle was huge. So that brief was only about enough to fill about a third of the old castle. So, and they were very realistic. I mean, they'd been trying to salvage the castle for kind of 30 years. Peter Pearce, the director, told us that when he came in, when he started the job, and he's now moved on to another job, but that's about 10 years ago, he sort of took on the job as director and was handed this giant pile of documents which showed their efforts to salvage this thing, and they'd all come to nothing because full restoration was so expensive. And so I think it was very much felt this was kind of last chance saloon. It was about to fall down, and so it's a very realistic view that it was no longer about trying to reconstruct or anything. It was about saving the most important bits of it.
And because it's sort of a historically significant building, did the fact that it was this last-ditch attempt somehow free you up from that, the pressure? They looked at restoration. That wasn't it was really becoming a remnant. Did that creatively then free you somehow to express design ideas more broadly?
Maybe, I suppose we probably, if it had been a pure restoration project or reconstruction, we wouldn't have been in the mix. So, we didn't really come from a background of doing historic buildings. I mean, we'd sort of done some work to old buildings, kind of almost by a little bit of exaggeration, so it's by accident, but it wasn't really something that we planned to get into. But what we found is that, I guess, probably the most interesting and engaged clients have existing buildings, have kind of limited resources, and in terms of burden or freedom, I don't know, you just sort of go along, and there's this thing that you respond to. I mean, we had done all sorts of things prior to that old industrial areas and places where you feel history. So I suppose we just had an attitude to history that, maybe it's sort of, London is where we're based, in London, there's been all sorts of fascinating discoveries of old Shakespearean theatres and things like this in Shoreditch, where our offices used to be. In fact, one of them was opposite a building we did. And the reason this happens is because we're always demolishing things in London. So there's a different sense of history, that I guess that the city just kind of keeps changing and keeps remaking. And I mean, which isn't to say that you know, you necessarily like all of that, but certainly this sort of sense that history isn't this sort of frozen thing and that you treat with kids.
You mentioned that your colleague, Christopher Watson, he visited the site and came back with some pretty clear impressions, quite immediate responses. What were those?
Oh, he came back and said, yeah, it's great. We need two things. We have to build inside the old manor, so the oldest manor, this sort of thing with these 2 metre deep walls, you know. We build in the oldest part of the house, and it's an amazing landscape. We have to make use of that by getting up to at least first floor level. Really clear, and you know, I guess that's that. You know, we stuck with that.
So do you think because it was a 5-year process, you had time to kind of digest and review and you know, shift slightly what was your initial
Oh,
view?
definitely, and I suppose we had to. I mean, in many ways, what we built, if you see our competition scheme and what we built, you'd say, yeah, that's the same scheme. You know, the main things are it's an upside down house, so you got the living room on the first floor and the bedrooms on the ground floor. It's this sort of little bit inside out in the sense that you've got these courtyards that are both part of the house, but they're external, and they got these roofs on them. So yeah, I mean, there's just sort of key directions like that. Some of it changed through kind of process things outside our control. Some of it we just got a better sense of, I don't know, how this whole thing was going to move and act together. So I guess one of the striking things now is the concrete never touches the stone. There's always this kind of edging of brick that the concrete bears on, and the brick's then tied into the stone. So it's a kind of, and the whole thing's made with lime mortar. So the whole thing's got this sort of soft. It's this mixture of. It's a sort of mixture of it's very strong tools. You know, that I suppose particularly precast concrete, spanning these big gashes, and then I don't know, brought. But you can't just crash those into the stone. So it's kind of brought into a kind of softer contact with the existing structure, and that's, you know, for reasons of movement above, you know, above anything.
Well, I guess there's that thing of you're dealing with a ruin, and you know, things shift, things move, and so you needed. I remember you saying you created a kind of armature, and part of what you did was, you know, give the building strength, and how important that was.
This is I don't know if you can see this. This is this model we made of, and this is about sort of 2 or 3 years into probably 2 years into the process. I suppose trying to crystallise this idea. What is it we're doing? You know, because you know, you're trying to make rooms. You're trying to, at the same time, a lot of it is you know, most of the fabric's inherited. So this idea then was that the new construction it's almost as little as you can make. Because, in all honesty, once you cleared the pile of rubble out of the house, and sort of more sadly, you know, the ivy and kind of plant life, you've got an amazing place. You've got an amazing place that sort of, the rooms still feel like they're there, but then you've got, I mean, you've got light flooding in, you've got amazing views. So in a way, what we were doing was trying to build as little new as possible. Certainly. So, and I guess and what we got to then was this idea that you kind of reinforce the masonry shell, the masonry fragments, it's like this rotten tooth, and you give it this kind of armature that actually binds it together, but it's as little as possible. You're reinstating the volume, but you know, you're leaving these giant gashes. You know, so because as soon as you start getting large areas of new masonry, I don't know, it's a very very different beast. So yeah, we did that, and then there's this sort of second layer really, which is almost like carpentry, just that which roof it, subdivide it, add in make a first floor. All of that's carpentry, and there's bits and pieces we might have, tactically, or someone saying, "Oh, why don't you do that in concrete block and render it?" And we tried to keep that kind of clarity, purity. I mean, it's a bit daft to talk of purity when everything's so broken, but a kind of crispness of the idea that you do as little of this masonry as possible. You bind it together. You give it its kind of weight back by binding it at this high level. So you've got these big lintels, and then there's a decent chunk of brickwork above those. So it gives it that kind of sense of being. I suppose it stabilises it. It gives it its presence, but it leaves it kind of open and incomplete. And then it's kind of inhabited by this sort of rhythmic, warm timber that creates these little, whether it's creates the smaller bedrooms, this kind of studwork cage of the staircase that comes up into, you enter into it, so it's sort of hollow or empty, comes up into the middle of the living space, and then these stepped windows that create these little kind of niches where, if you look now, that's where people sort of sit, pull up a chair, sit in that bay, and you're sort of half in and half out.
I mean, I think also one of the things you mentioned, which sort of hadn't really occurred to me, was, because it was a building that has been around for centuries, that you had different kind of architectural atmospheres within the building as different styles changed and so forth. And though I remember you mentioned that there'd been a little garden, like when things were kind of more frivolous and fun, and then things changed again.
You feel this massively, and and I suppose it's not unreasonable to characterise this as, in some ways, as old and new, but what you realise is that the old is, there is no singular old. You've got something like 8 centuries of building, and they built it and rebuilt it and remade it and blocked some windows up and knocked some new ones in. So you got the sense that this was kind of very dynamic thing. And I guess, almost in relation to your earlier question of that sort of sense of freedom, that was the thing that gave us freedom. And that's something that we've learned from 1 or 2 projects prior to that, we're not the second architects to come along, and we've got someone, I don't know, either dead who's going to be turning in their grave, or alive who's going to be angry, sort of saying, "You can't do that to my building." You've got sort of half a dozen or more people who've kind of made and remade it. So it's already this kind of collective work. So on the one hand, you go in with a lot of humility, because, I don't know, possibly in 100 years' time, someone's going to be doing the same. But equally, you go in with a kind of a courage or a kind of directness that you do what it takes to kind of make that whole, or to make that that kind of coherence now. I mean, in terms of these different kind of ages of the building, I mean, there's these bits with, a little bit of architectural history, but, not in book form. It's like in building form, and it's not chapters that are, different styles. They're different rooms, and they have this sort of awkward and interesting relationship. So the medieval manor, probably 12th century, so just after the Norman conquest, Romanesque arches, not many windows, very, I guess, gloomy and defensive. And even, there was a period of peace there, but I guess times were kind of brutal and hard and defensive and quite military. And then there's a Gothic edition, which is by the Grey family, who had their moment there, and which is rather fine, but it's just one room, or two rooms, one above the other. It's just a very small wing. There's then a couple of Elizabethan bits added, and in a way, you're moving at the kind of pure architectural level. You're moving from round arches to pointed arches to kind of trabeated with multiple stone mullions. This sort of slightly Gothic, classical kind of quality of Elizabethan architecture. But you're also moving from big lots of wall and not much window to lots of window and not much wall, and that just sort of you can feel this, and even that timber gallery that we ended up having to remove, or it already just sort of collapsed. I mean, that's everyone had a kind of long gallery, and I'm not sure was it to hang they hung paintings or played bowls, or it was. You can see by that point there's just a totally different tenor of life. They got decorative gardens spreading far out beyond the castle walls. So yes, and then you pick up, and you just got bits of these. So they're kind of suggested. Some places they're very coherent. Some places it's just a few stones. And so the thing about that then is that making a house within that, you've already got this very clear kind of topography that's made for you of these places that are a bit more introverted, darker, more sheltered. The sense of shelter and the sense of exposure, or as you say, sort of frivolity or sort of festive feel. There's all these different moods already there, and this. I mean, I suppose the thing that's also important to mention is that this is not anyone's private house. This is a house. The Landmark Trust. Their model is they save historic buildings, and they rent them out. You can rent them for 2 days or up to 2 weeks. So people come with, and this, 4 bedrooms, sort of not just a nuclear family. So people can come with with several generations of their family, or kind of groups of friends who see each other once a year. And so there is this sense that it's a different set of users to, certainly we'd have done a totally different thing, I think, if we're doing a private house. And so those moods, those atmospheres, I think then they're probably kind of heightened. And, so it's not just that that's what we inherited, it's that's who's using it. And there's quite a good match between those.
I think that what you've described is a really wonderful way to look at it, both that kind of, because we tend to have this thing of history as a sealed thing that's set in time, and not look at it over that long period of time. And as you say, your work might just be the latest incarnation in a very long series of various treatments to the space. And then on the other hand, everybody comes to it new with a fresh sense of excitement. People who come and stay in it, the romance and the way you've done it, and so you get a new set of responsiveness every time people visit, which I think is really, it keeps delivering a kind of level of it's got a charge to it, and then people can appreciate both the nuance of the little things and the splendor of the more significant structural things.
I think that's right. Yes, I mean, I suppose the thing that's kind of, I think, emblematic about this project, and in a way why we've had this interesting reaction to it. We've had a couple of interesting reactions, but part of the response we got is just that I think we've made a kind of proposition where we say it doesn't have to. The old has a capacity for change, and I think even the old is a part of our capacity for change. If you remove all our familiar structures and topographies, you actually remove our collective capacity for change. So in a way, there's this thing where we expect architecture to kind of, or buildings to adapt and become faster as our world speeds up. But you know what? It works just as well if the buildings slow down and we, the people, make the change.
I mean, and few buildings manage to walk this tightrope, between pleasing the architectural profession and the public at the same time. But you've had extraordinary success with both, with the Sterling Prize and then also, for the Landmark Trust, the place is booked out for years ahead, I hear. Is that quite gratifying?
Oh, it is. It is. I mean, I guess that's the reward of making something that either is for the public or is in the public eye. And I suppose this isn't something that we'd imagine necessarily being public in quite that way. I mean, like I say, it's not a private house. It is this sort of collective thing. But nonetheless, it's sort of it's reached a broader public than we'd have ever imagined. But locally, it already was absolutely firmly lodged in the kind of collective imagination. Absolutely kind of classic thing of it sort of declined from being an aristocratic house to then they build another one in the 18th century, and so it becomes the kind of inconvenient old house, and then tenanted or whatever, and then used as a convalescent home in the Second World War, and then it was a hotel, and so everyone in the area for kind of christenings or weddings or whatever had it at Astley Castle. So, and this was a thing that we weren't really aware of, but clearly was very important to them. And so that's great to work on something that's got already that kind of emotional investment and charge to it, as long as you don't mess it up. Buildings should outlive people, and that's not what our economy now is about. Our economy is now treating buildings as consumables that you knock down. But as we live longer and longer, if you lose all those landmarks, or you lose things that you're sharing with other generations of your family or with other generations of your city. So I think those are two kind of very concrete illustrations of how specific kind of individuals have responded.
Do you think it's changed how its success has changed the attitude of, say, organisations like the Landmark Trust, how they might approach other buildings? Because it was quite a leap for them. But now that it's worked, has it altered their approach?
It was definitely, there's an element of our work that was sort of like culture change. You're helping people go somewhere where they sort of know they need to go there, but they don't necessarily want to go there. I think the Landmark Trust has a very specific kind of mission, and so this is an extreme case, and it's a very unusual situation. So a lot of people, the funny thing is, a lot of people can see that the relevance of this absolute one-off to their situation. At the same time, it's a very one-off thing,
Yeah.
Even the amount of ruin, there's we inherited half a house. If you'd got 90% of a house or only 10%, what would you do?
Yes.
It's very different, So there is this rather perfect thing just in the setup that we inherited enough old house that you could run with it, but not so much that you were totally kind of tied in and you're just sort of dotting I's and crossing T's.
No, I think that's absolutely true, and therein kind of lies the magic of some of these opportunities, that they do seem a bit like a sliding doors situation, that if you're just there with the right attitude and the right opportunity, it can all come together, as you say, like in a perfect storm. Thanks so much.
I think that's right, because in some countries you might say that some Mediterranean countries, they've been doing this kind of thing for decades. I don't know how much we were aware of that fully, but it's
probably better not to be too over aware.
That's right. I guess we felt just a sense of excitement
yes.
what we were dealing with. We poured a lot of creative energy into it. It came at a good time for us as an office.
Yes.
And you can't ask for a lot more than that, can you?
No, and it all worked beautifully. Oh, thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant to talk to you again. And
best of luck with the show.
Thank you, and thanks for your time.